Good morning, my name is Mark Addison. I'm a PhD student here in the Web Science CDT, and thankfully one of my supervisors now left, but Les and Dave, who's here, are my supervisors. The subject of my study is the longitudinal care of hypertext, especially things like system knowledge, less the case with encyclopedic information or literary works, but actually where we have process and knowledge that is actually evanescent and lives within hypertext systems. And a bit of origin story, although I'm only recently at this parish, first half of my working life was spent at sea as a signals officer, so I'm well used to networks and systems, and computers are probably less powerful than my phone is these days. And leaving that, I happened to basically fall into a startup right at the dawn of the web, and was selling children's software, in fact, on the web in the early 90s. And I've made my trade around the web until I arrived back here to do some study. This is the subject of my talk, premature linearization, and if you see an echo of Shipman and Marshall in here, that's deliberate, and I'll come back to that in a bit. We have a liking for linearity. It's very much, I think, in our cultural veins. We teach people to linearize and to create a story as a way of explaining things. And initially we've made marks in clay, we've scribbled on tablets, we've written on parchment, and that linearity has moved through into the codex book. And although probably most of us here spend more time working in a digital environment than we do writing on paper, we're still very much thinking in these terms, in terms of pages and documents. So in other words, we're still thinking in this manner. I'm going to skip through some of this quite quickly, because I think, having got a feel for the audience, most of you will know some of this. I wasn't quite sure. Anyway, so hypertext was a neologism of Ted Nelson's in the 60s, to mid-60s. That's sort of around the arrival of colour television, for those able to remember that far back. He likes his neologisms, and you may also have heard this phrase, that everything is deeply intertwingled, which was in his book, Computer Lived and Dream Machines. A cruel irony is that it was a paper, a self-published book, and it's now rather hard to find, which means probably not so many people would have read this bit, which was what he was writing about, the intertwingularity. And what he was getting at is that lots of things don't linearize easily. And it's something, by and large, we tend to put aside. We just work around it, so we leave out the difficult stuff. And that's not necessarily a good thing. Now we potentially have the tools to work with that complexity. Now, don't try and read this. The point of this is in fact, a spatial hypertext deconstruction of some US government policy. It actually has no outputs and only two inputs, which are weather and money. But this doesn't linearize. So sometimes there is no spoon. We have to bend around the data to try and do something with it. And we now have a medium in hypertext that allows us to do this, and yet we're still very much imbued with doing things in a linear fashion. It's also worth bearing in mind that before the web, hypertext was alive and well and doing things. Some of the Southampton folk will recognise Microcosm, just brought back to life this summer in the emulation, Story Space, note cards. Couldn't find a picture of Vicky, so that's actually a VKB. And so we had this quite healthy system of hypertext, and beginning to explore some of the structures and the way that we can use linked pieces of text. And then this happened, which is not a bad thing, but the erstwhile limitations of the system means that some of the richness that was being created in hypertext systems basically just got put to one side. And also the focus on the web meant the interest and the money followed that technology, and perhaps some things got left by the roadside. I mean, going back, it's worth saying that this is the only system, now 35 years old, under the care of Eastgate, that's actually still alive these days. Stepping back to Bush's work in 1945, and as we may think, the thing that stood out to me when I first came across this work was the concept of trails, which brought me up short because that's very much how I always thought about things, and it was nice to sort of read something that was saying the same thing. There are multiple ways through the facts that we find. We're good at associative things. We sit down, we do a jigsaw. We're quite relaxed with the fact that we can put all the blue bits in one corner, the red bits in another corner. We don't know how they interrelate at that point, but we know they have some form of relation. So we can do some work without having to have these linearized, fixed constructs that come out of our normal form of writing. So there are multiple ways through things. And yet, when I talk to people now, hypertext is basically something to do with the web, or if for some of the literary people it's about non-linear literature, to some of the more technical folk it's really about protocols, but what it isn't about, seemingly, is the medium of hypertext. And I think that's a loss, and it's something we need to recover. So I mentioned Shipman and Marshall's paper, which was formality considered harmful. And whilst they were writing on a slightly broader canvas than text itself, I think the same principles apply. And I'm very interested to see what's coming with Frode's author application, because I think it's addressing some of these latter points. And this brings me around to the questions that I had set up for really thinking to the unconference tomorrow. So the first of these is, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not saying we should stop doing linear works or that we mustn't have a narrative to thing. But one problem is it's actually quite difficult when writing to hold on to the options available to you, because our writing tools basically plump us straight into a linear form. You open up something like Word, you see a facsimile of a piece of paper, and you start to write on it. What you don't have is the sort of flexibility that was in Doug Engelbart's work, the concept that comes from Nelson's ideas. So we need to start making our tools, make tools that let us actually have this flexibility. And the last thing is, where are the hypertextualists? We don't have to write in linear form now. And whilst it's not the case that a multi-path as opposed to a single path model wins out, but I do think we need to start developing and nurturing the skills of people who understand the hypertext medium as opposed to the way we've written in the past. And that...
You actually have 2 minutes.
Well...
Okay, great questions. Thank you.
So...
Questions? Sorry,
Gyuri Lajos, just one comment on the linear. There is that word explain, which really means laying out in place. Laying out in place so that I can get it in a graph.
Yes.
So there is that. I fully agree with everything you said. Yeah. I'm just trying to say that there is a point that this fixation of I want to see it at a glance. It doesn't mean that it's has to be linear or whatever.
No, I think you're absolutely right. But I think the point I was trying to show is that maybe we need to be open to the notion that we can create multiple paths through. I mean, I found it very interesting Stacey's talk, echoing some things I've been thinking about, which is this thing about something I've learned from writing hypertext resources for others to use is the way it's changed the size of the nodes of text I write, because if you make them too large, there's possibility for different trails through there, and to allow for people's different frame of reference and different vernacular with which they come to the work. If you have more trails, more ways through it, there's more chance that a greater number of people can understand it. And with something like the web, which allows us to have asynchronous random access to stuff, it's much better if there are more ways for people to engage with our information than having to just have a single canonical way.
Just wanted to defend the codex briefly, and I think not just because of what you said, but I'm worried in these conversations that we might be conflating something about the medium and the text. So the physical affordances of the codex and what people had at the time, we've seen this with the cuneiform and so on. The text that's represented on that isn't necessarily linear. I mean, it can be richly hypertextual in the codex.
But generally it is. No, I accept. And in the short time we had to discuss it, I had to pick out the central argument.
take that one step further, I'm not saying the medium isn't important, I'm saying the medium is incredibly important. You need to understand that medium in which the text is represented to understand the text.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes.
Have you put thought into relation of hypertext and hyperdata? So it seems like in the case of hyperdata, which is big data, you really you can explore the data in from any kind of perspective, since you can have. I think you see this hyper element of the hypertext is even more clearly visible in a hyperdata.
Absolutely. And one of the interesting things, I mean, one of the things that sort of got sloughed off from hypertext at the time, the advent of the web, was our links are less rich than they used to be. And one of the things, when I watch what some of my colleagues are doing with language processing, with AI and semantic web, I find it odd that we're not, as humans, trying to capture some of our own internal semantics in the way we write, in the way we link, so that our machine learning coming the other way down the track can say, this is what the human beings are thinking about. It's feeding with a bit more structure as opposed to making a brute force attack on our intellect. I throw that idea out there anyway.
I'd just like to point out that's a very important thing, but Mark, you're the person I know who speaks the most not straightforward logical. You have so much poetry in your language. You know, even in this presentation, there was a few things like, what did that mean? How do you propose that fits with what you just said?
What, my language? Well, if it's anything like my writing, which my family says is a bit like an obscure form of crypto, I don't know. It may be beyond saving. But no, I mean, that's another aspect, actually, of this whole interrelation and hypertext, I think, is the fact that we use different scripts, we use different languages, we use different vernacular, and maintaining sense across that and providing some bridges, I think, is also an important thing, lest we just think that all knowledge derives from one monoglot source, and that would be to humanity's loss.
Great answer. We have time for one more. Yes, please.
Do you think we are linear or we become linear through education?
I'd say I think it's a process we've learned, and there's nothing wrong with it. I'd stress again, this isn't a zero-sum game. It's just that what we've learned, I think, prejudices are, well, not that's the wrong word, but it leads us to start from a linear perspective, and we don't need to do that as much as we needed to. So it should be one of our skills, not the skill, when we come to trying to communicate with people.
Thank you. Faith Lawrence.
Hi, so I'm taking a slightly different direction to a lot of the presentations that have been here so far. Just a brief bit of background. Some people in the room know me because I was a PhD student here about a decade ago, which is scary. And I sort of wandered in from the humanities, nested a bit, and then sort of wandered back to the humanities, but in a much more digital sense. And my area of interest was always really looking at digital fiction, but especially looking at online fiction and online fan fiction and fan communities, and how the fiction and the works that they created fitted in with these narratives that they were looking at. Anybody who's interested in designing for communities, that's my PhD thesis. It's available on ePrints. Chris is wondering why it's still the most downloaded. It's because I put the URL up everywhere I go. And so what we think about, when we think about text, there is what is actually written, the letters, the symbols, but there's also the greater idea of text. The text is the document, the text is the concept, the text is the story. And we take that and we do things with it as well. And you see that it's become much more prominent, the idea of transformative works, of transformative culture, of the recognition that one text is based on another, the transtextuality, the intertextuality. And this has always happened from the beginning. We go back to oral culture, this is not something new, but we're seeing much more recognition of it in the Web 2.0 era. But again, this really isn't new at all. So just to make sure everybody's on the same page with what I'm talking about, when I'm saying fan fiction now, and they're still arguing about whether it should be written as one word or two words or abbreviated to fanfic, I'm using this because it's the more formal version. the sort of definition we're thinking of is fiction that's written by fans for other fans, and it's inspired by something else, a source text, a famous person. This is not the original definition. The original definition goes back to the SF community, and it was just an amateur story written in a fanzine, or possibly a story by fans about other fans, which was fan fiction. The switch occurred around the mid-70s. Basically, we blame Star Trek. Man from U.N.C.L.E. might have got in there, but Star Trek was the big daddy of all of it, and almost anything you do looking at it, you can end up blaming Star Trek for something. The other important thing to note is there's still a massive taboo against profiting directly from written fan works. You can sell images, you can sell art, but not the written stuff. If you're going to do that, you better file the serial numbers off first and pretend it's original. Yes, there's been lots of moves recently with publishers going to mostly Wattpad, trying to find stuff that's popular, not necessarily good, but popular, and then publishing that. And yeah, there's a whole series of books and certain movies that we're not going to mention, which everybody knows came from Fanfiction, which just proves they're not picking the good stuff. As I say, largely it goes back to oral culture, but even then it's not new, even if we're just thinking about the written stuff. We know in the 1850s, Jane Austen's nieces were writing fan fiction on her works. We've got Sherlock Holmes pastiches from the 1890s and onwards. It's mentioned in Little Women. They set up their own club and they're writing it. Getting on to the more modern stuff, we have Icelandir, which was a fanzine, which was Tolkien fan fiction and published in 1960. And then, as I said, we blame Star Trek. Modern fandom really starts taking off. Spockanalia being the first fanzine that was published, but they're by far not the first fan fiction. But this is really when it starts kicking in. Just to quickly go through a few quick myths. It's all written by obsessed teenage girls. There's actually a lot to unpack here. Yes, it is mostly written by women. We are looking at 80 to 90% women, and they are very technology forward. So basically inverse the rest of the web, and you get fan communities, and that makes it interesting in and of itself. Teenage, bit debatable, based on the area you're looking. I've seen one demographic that did put the peak in the teens, but most of the others puts the peak in the late teens to early 20s, i.e. university age, where you have some time. The obsessed I can't really talk about. The big myth, it's all bad. Well, we all know Sturgeon's law, 90% of everything is all bad, so some of it is completely unmitigated crap. But it's also written by 12-year-olds, so it's pretty good. For, you know, when you're getting thousands of words long stories written by a 12-year-old, that's actually quite high on top of the curve for a 12-year-old. It's all either porn or it's all gay. Again, it depends on the area you go. One of the big archives that you can actually get the stats from, Archive of Our Own, about 2/3 of it is definitely not explicit. 1/3 is either maybe adult or explicit, or they refuse to say. So that's probably getting smaller, because some of the stuff where they refuse to say won't necessarily be explicit. And when we say explicit, that could be for violence. It doesn't necessarily mean for sex. Again, the all-gay romance, it depends where you go. There is a fairly large percentage of it. On AO3, again, about 45% is marked as having a gay relationship. The next biggest group is Gen. That's no relationship at all. And that is, I think, about a quarter. So it's still not all there. It's written by people who can't work out their own stuff. Well, one, that's blatantly untrue, because lots of people are writing their own stuff as well. But also it's the challenge of writing within a set of structures and guidelines. And also you start with the one point and then you can go anywhere with it. So you're really not controlled, you're just being honest about your sourcing. And it's what you do until you become a real or a professional writer. Well, other than the fact that lots of real and professional writers also write fanfic, a lot of people doing it don't want to be paid for it. They don't want to become a professional writer, they're just doing it for fun. So most of those, some of them are a little bit true, most of them not true at all. Why is it interesting to look at? It's got an incredibly low barrier for entry if we're thinking about text. There's actually quite a lot of it out there. I mean, we are talking many millions. Now, compared to literature in general, that's a small amount, but compared to what is available as digital literature, that's actually quite a big percentage. And even the stuff that's not digital, there's actually in community projects to digitize some of the old works, to actually make it digital. It's freely available online. You can actually get at it. We don't need to worry about the author's permissions. We don't need to worry about the copyright. I mean, you do need to worry about the author's permissions a bit. But it's not behind a paywall. And one of the interesting things, because it's amateur writers who are writing strictly for the community, there are different social pressures and different gatekeeping on it than there is in pro literature. So a lot of the studies, especially coming out of English and the other places, you're looking at, 19th century novels or whatever else, stuff that's gone through gatekeepers and publication. And this has got a different set of structures and pressures on it, but it's also more fast moving. You see very, very similar ideas with how themes move, how something becomes popular and then everybody copies it. But it's working at a much, much faster pace than traditional literature. So we can study this and then go back. So what sort of thing am I saying it would be interesting to look at? Relationships. We've got stuff going through from the 1970s to now. Think about the amount of social change that has happened within that time. Again, we start with Star Trek. One of the big first pairings was Kirk and Spock. So in the 1970s, writing about a gay pairing was actually pretty taboo. Now, it's like somebody wearing a green shirt. You really shouldn't get upset by it. Sometimes the shade of green you might not like. So looking at how over that time we have a changing depiction of homosexuality. Recently, asexuality is massively coming through, and we're seeing a massive growth in it. Looking at how safe sex is presented. What, do the characters actually use condoms? Most of them do. How has this message got through to the female audience, and where they're teens, the teen female audience, that we actually have characters who are remembering to use safe sex? And you will see stories which actually have apologies at the top for not writing realistically by not including safe sex. That's really interesting to think about how those social messages have got through. And of course, marriage equality. My theory is that fanfic is about 3 years in advance of reality. Quickly going through, so we can do stuff with tropes as well. One of the examples is Gay for You, which over the few years has become Out for You, on the basis that people are not magically making up gay. This is important because we're seeing the reflections of social change and possibly predictions for going forward in social change. And what's really interesting is the community themselves are interested in not only preservation, but developing new software and new tools to take them forward into the future. And I remember when we were looking at some of the early archives around 10 years ago and having a conversation with Chris, and he was going, wow, they basically got to the same place ePrint has, but just by trial and error. And some of the stuff that they're doing with metadata and tagging and linking that up is the sort of thing you actually don't see anywhere else, but is amazingly forward-thinking in terms of the usage. And just thinking about how this links in with text as something that is taking the communities forward, and the communities are taking text forward. And while they also look at video, while they create audiobooks, while they do images, because of its low barrier of entry, the text remains popular and is definitely here to stay going into the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions?
So where do
do you find all this stuff?
Well, would you like the more kiddie archive, which bans the explicit stuff and is a bit more sort of cartoon-based, or would you like the grown-up archive? I mean, basically, can I go online?
Yeah.
Risky.
What? Do you want me to type it, or do you want to type?
If you type in archiveofourOwn.org.
Just
oh.
you plug in that.
So, this is one of the big new modern archives. They started off about 4 years ago now, and they're only up to 3 and a bit million stories. This is probably the newest one that's been developed, and this is where all the sort of high-tech modern development has gone in, which is why it's the newer one. And currently they only actually archive text themselves. They will also do videos and images, but you have to host them externally. They're working on looking at doing archives for video and for images, but there are slightly more legal issues with those. So the video one will probably be a dark archive, won't necessarily be freely available. They're just trying to do it for preservation. They don't currently have an an API for easy extraction of stuff, but it is on their timeline for the future because they know people are interested in doing research on it. But this one is good because you've got all the sort of numbers attached. So if I just go to, well, let's give me the recent ones, you can see that not only do they have a massive amount of data attached, but you can sort of see the different things. And if you go to search, then you've got the many bits of metadata that you can search on and see the numbers for each of the sections.
You can create your own as well.
Okay, I'm trying not to go over time. What's really interesting about this
You have 3
is
minutes.
some sections that they have set metadata that you need to add. So these ones here where they've got the checky boxes, you've got to do one. But the other bits are free text entry. But then they actually have volunteers. If I just go to the tags and pick the let's just pick action. Right. So this is the sets of tags. And basically, once somebody has entered them as free text, there are volunteers behind them who link up both the canonical and the hierarchical aspects of those tags. So in terms of the searching, you're actually searching on the hierarchy. This also means it can be really interesting that you can actually start going in and see the developing hierarchy as it's coming in and what people are tagging and how they are being linked together. And they have a whole set of basically rules about what the canonical tag should be, when tags can be merged, and how they fit in the hierarchy. So this is what I'm saying about them doing some really interesting stuff that you don't really see anywhere else to try and provide the combination of allowing free text tagging and author expression, but also supporting searching. And if anybody wants to know more about this, ask me at lunch.
One more question, maybe?
Is any of this interactive, or is it mainly linear?
Yes, some of it is interactive. I mean, it depends a little bit what you mean by interactive. So you do get some where you have branching paths. So you get hypertextual ones. There are certainly ones where you can decide which ending you want. You quite often see those where you're deciding which of the characters get together and you can read your preference one. There is also interactivity in that you get stuff which is posted sequentially. So you have comments and feedback. And some of those can actually lead to sort of combined storytelling going on, especially because, well, if these are based on sources, you will also get ones that are based on other ones, other fic. So you sort of get very much intertwingled, to use that word, development of stories, which adds in an interactivity. You also get fan games being developed of various types, but they don't necessarily tend to be...
The wrong way around. Okay.
I think you get interactive fiction ones as well, but I think a lot of the interactive fiction communities are not really sure about the fan bits, so they don't talk to each other as much. IF being a bit more male-dominated and see the myths about fan fiction. So, yes, but a lot of it is linear just because of low barrier of entry. But as soon as you've got that, people start dicking with it in an appropriate term.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
He's using a Microsoft product. We'll be right with you. Do you know how
On
to
Mac,
do it?
just to add to the fun.
Yeah, do you know how to do it without the presenter? See if that works. No.
Just use swap.
Yeah, how do we do swap screens?
Little button at the top. Put it into presenter mode again.
Here.
Yeah, click start.
Thank you.
And then at the top, you see way at the top there's 3 buttons.
We can't actually see that on here.
It's on
Okay, here. Oh, swap display.
Stop.
Fantastic. That one, right? I'm trying to click it. Thank you. David Price.
Thank you. Thank you, Faith. This is possibly going to be my own form of fan fiction because it's such a joy to be part of the community that Frode has gathered together and the community that he honours through time as well. And bringing, and it's a community of people who set the infrastructure and the thought structure for all of us who are speaking here today. And so bringing a web science project here is a little bit like bringing a school science project to Einstein and Newton. So, one of the giants that I include in this is my co-founder, Peter Baldwin. For those that don't know, he was a young politician in Australia who was beaten brutally in his home, challenging corruption in his local area. He became an MP in his 30s and a cabinet minister in his 40s. And he retired from frontline politics, frustrated with the polarised nature of debate, to become a coder, to develop software to help change the nature of politics. And I'll be showing some of that as we're going through today. So a lot of this will be familiar. Text is proliferating. It's been, as Frode has said earlier, hugely successful. Global scientific output has doubled roughly every 9 years since the mid-1940s. We've created a body of knowledge that's impossible for any one of us to comprehend in our individual sense. And so we're starting to think about how we can begin to work with that. And it's more than that because the text, the knowledge that we're creating is changing what it means to be human. So we're not only writing text, but we're starting to write DNA. We're creating, through DeepMind and other tools, narrow and increasingly broad intelligence that can understand text and other things better than humans can and an individual can. And we're also, with Neuralink and other developments, working on the interface between human and machines. And so the nature of what it means to be human is also one of the factors that is complexifying significantly as we're going forward. Of course, this is a tremendously wonderful thing. It means that the world is enveloped in text and knowledge, and that the great ideas can emerge anywhere in the world, the positive deviants, and can be found quickly and can be implemented quickly. And so the potential for good to flow from this is absolutely amazing, and we're seeing that in so many different ways. But there's a flip side to it. The stream that we create creates a precision of ilth. It happens in various ways, but the constant flow of isolated messages flowing past you can become decontextualizing. It can make it harder to see coherence and to understand your relationship to the whole. And we've also seen in the midst of the last election the way that process, this tremendous potential that there has been industrialized and used to stir quite deliberately uncertainty and cynicism within people's minds to help accentuate the polarizing effects. And so there's this twin face to the challenge that's emerging with the success of text. And so one of the questions is, how do we live in the midst of this complexity? You can reject it or you can embrace it. And there's a nice example in some senses recently of that rejection at work. The US Energy Agency instructing climate scientists to remove references to climate change and global warming from the documents that they're preparing. And a different reference to nature in this context, Richard Feynman, familiar quote, "Reality must take precedence over public relations, for nature cannot be fooled." You can only deny evolving process around you for so long before you're confronted with the reality of that. And some might say that we're seeing some of that in the US at the moment as well. So how do we do? The thing is, we know how to work in this context. There's a beautiful life of affirming process that we see at work in many cultures at many times in different parts of history. And we see the sort of pattern with that. It's live in science when it's working well, in democracy when it's working well, law, programming, mediation. It's this continuous, open, playful, questioning, testing, I won't read them all, reciprocal, accountable process. We know that if we can create that and sustain that, that humans can flourish in a really wonderful way. And the web gives us the ability to do that on a global scale in an unprecedented way. So across the last 10 years with my co-founder Peter, I've been working on DebateGraph, a tool which echoes a lot of what Mark was talking about earlier this morning. It's a way of taking the conversations that are occurring and beginning to isolate the individual pieces of those and to weave them together through visual links, allowing you to explore the reasoning structure that underpins them, allowing you to explore the dialogical structure that lies around that, allowing you to identify the sets of evidence that speak to that, to view that evidence in context, and gives you a way to focus in on the particular topic, your particular expertise, and to map that in detail so that others can see that. But while giving you the focus, also giving you the context at all times. It gives you a way to collapse a graph into documents and a way to take the document and expand it out to view it as a graph. It mixes tree structures that are hierarchical and tell a kind of linear story with the graph structure that interconnects between each of the leaves and the branches on the trees. And the relationship between the trees and the graphs is always provisional and continuously evolving. And it also, increasingly important, I can't see this, but it's accessible in a machine-readable form as well, so that the graphs can create kind of ontologies that can inform and strengthen machine reading, and the machine reading process can strengthen the work of the people who are curating, trying to develop these tools. One of the things that's really interesting about this for the film Arrival, I talked about the sapirwhorf hypothesis, the sense that the language that we use, the structure of that shapes the way that we think, shapes the way that we are in the world. It's nice in the film, it's emphasizing the non-linearity of the communication. And the graph on the right is an example of a graph that we've been working on a project across the last few years with several hundred scientists around the world thinking about the future of global health. There are too many different disciplines, too many different people, too many different dimensions to hold in your head at a particular time. But if you can patiently curate the structure of that, everyone can begin to work and be informed by a structure that's not confined to the linear documents that each person is generating. And so, again, building on what Mark was talking about, thinking about what it means, having worked for a decade, to be in the space of these trees and graphs that are evolving in this way. And text goes back to its roots of weaving, and even in the Proto-European form, Indo-European form as well of tech. And there's a sense that we're part of this. In a sense, text might be thought of as a specialised case of a much broader process of pulling meaning into a particular form that's evolving through time. And the more that we can see things in this linear and non-linear way, the more that we can continue to build productively. And in the spirit of the future of text, I've shared here 3 words which I've begun to think about as what it's like to experience to be in this space. Dialogue is the sense of a planetary conversation, the fact that there is a conversation that, if you see it as such, has contours and texture that you can explore and begin to dive into. You can also think about that in a much broader sense. You can think about the communication between the bacteria within us and within our brains and so on, but we can go into that later. Literacy is the sense of how, given that understanding, we begin to work in that context. Particular elements of particularly the ability to hold focus and context, to hold things as provisional and always evolving. and collaboration is the kind of ethos that you have towards that, something that's celebrating the identity in a moment, honouring the value that it's created to this point and what it constitutes, but also being fundamentally committed to continuing to elaborate that in the face of the evolving world around. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's got to be some questions after that. Henry?
There's a French philosopher, Bernard Stiegler, who argues that democracy comes out of actually opposition, of debates of different ideas. So I think what he's interested in is finding out what kind of, how can one structure debate in the world in such a way as to make it more constructive. I don't know, I suppose it would be a big game where you could have points where debates could move up and you'd have like chess masters playing at higher levels. I don't know, has there been any thought about that? Is that the area?
Yes, in a sense.
Perhaps there's ways of improving it in the internet, making it more...
Yes, that was the start of the intuition of the work that we were working on, beginning to... The graph of the debates was the starting point for that. And interestingly, there are very creative work going on building games into that context. The US Navy is doing some very interesting work there. Just wanted to add to that, though, that what you find is when you begin to work with the graphs of debates, that reason will only take you so far, that it can be very useful to dive into particular arguments and to look at the logic that flows through those. But one of the things that you learn when you're working with the graph is that the Wittgenstein idea that the strength is not in any individual fibre, but in the overlapping of the fibres, and that the logic begins to break down. And so one of the main things I think that flows from that is the creation of a holding of a space and a sense, a stance towards others that is really deeply listening to what they have to offer, the different perspectives that they bring, the different experience that they bring to that. And you see that, and you all see yourselves as part of this larger whole. So debate is a really important part of that process, but it's not the totality of that process. And we see that in democracy more broadly as well.
So have you extracted insight from looking at things in this graphical model? I'd be very interested to hear one or two concrete examples of insight that derives from this way of looking at things.
Yes. Well, for example, in the large graph that I was showing, the work is focused on global child health, particularly focused on physical stunting and neurocognitive development. And the starting point with that is that you have people from different disciplines, each of whom have a tremendously precise knowledge of their particular intervention that could help in this context. And as you begin to map all of those interventions, as you map across different scales how that intervention works, whether it's intervening at a molecular level or whether it's intervening at a national level, what you begin to see actually is the set of interventions that can begin to make a more significant impact together with it. So that's a way, by being patient, by holding the structure, by not being attached to any particular part of it, you can actually begin to see patterns that it's really hard to discern in any other way with it.
Thank you very much, David.
Okay. Thank you.
I was going to try to pronounce your name, but I'm
Gyuri
afraid I will.
Lajos.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's make sure we have. Is this the correct setup?
Yes, and this one on the,
Oh,
I
the
would
other way
like that
around.
on the. I would like that on one of the screens.
So this is not.
Yes, I want to. This time I want to show the presenter screens as well, if possible.
Oh, of course.
Because we've got two screens. You choose which one to look, and so I want. Yeah. No, I want.
Both of them, right? Make it a bit smaller.
No, I would like this one on here and the other one there. if
Oh,
possible.
okay.
Because we've got two screens. No, if you can't, then sorry.
They're duplicated, you can't.
Yeah, but
Wait,
you can't split the screen.
No, not those two. No. That's the same.
Okay. Then just do as you are. So you can't have two different things. Then.
Thanks,
That's
Ricky.
fine.
I got a bit confused there
Okay,
too.
just forget that. Give that to me, and then just make this full screen.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry about that. It's very difficult to keep to my script after this morning, so I will violently skip bits and I have to reflect on what I heard. Mark, what you just said gave me the best byline. Capture semantics as the way we link, because that's exactly what Hyperpost does. So thank you for the tip. So anyhow, so I better watch it. I'm not restarting. So yeah, I don't know where to stand. Yeah. No, I'm used to this one. Oh, that doesn't work. Okay. Okay, so sorry. So I the reason I wanted to have both of them up was that this is absolutely experimental. This is of last week's final development, which actually delivers what I've been working on for the last 5 years. So excuse me, all the rough edges and the bells and the whistles are also missing, which is all there. I developed software versions of this 3 times. This is the 3rd generation, but the final and the last one. And so yes, so I really just want to tell you where I'm coming from. And I don't have to tell you our tools or thoughts are broken. But if anybody disagrees, raise your hands, please. Nobody. Thank you. And I would like to just look at some specific urgent problems to address, and I will be quick on those. And very briefly, how Hyperpost does it. And Hyperpost is not unlike many others. This isn't just one product. There are 5 other things which together give you what, say, Edgar did. But only the first 2 will already let you get off the ground. So, okay, let's get into it. Okay, we'll forget that. Yes, so where I'm coming from. Well, this is very interesting. I'm born Hungarian. At the age of 16, I was 16 when Foyer's book on how to solve it was translated into Hungarian by no other than Imre Lakatos. If these don't mean anything to you, please Google it. And basically, I was 16. I was at high school with a fantastic friend and a fantastic teacher. And basically, we spent our time with Benjo really just thinking about these things. That the most important thing, that the Hungarian translation of the book, How to Solve It, was School for Thought, a premonition of tools for thought. So really, at the end, we really said, that we really should have a school for thought. Oh no, we know there are computers, we really need tools for thought. So that's how we started. Okay, move on. Oh, meta-heuristic. And of course, both of them were inspired by Boretsky Elamir, our teacher, who the one that is relevant in this context and determined my life work is the discussion, to just tell me about how they try to use Hungarian as a meta-language when first trying to program a translation from English to Russian and back. Now, that idea, so early mind, when you get them when you're young, drop an idea in, something may come out, hopefully. Okay, so that's, and so really, my dream at the age of 18 was really to do augmented literary criticism. In the future, someday with the computer, we can do it, because I wrote an essay when I was 17. The task was, what was the role of law in the law and order in József Attila's poetry? And of course I read the whole thing, but I had to go there and underline every single poem which actually had these words. And I knew that one day we can do it with everything. And really to capture the mechanics of poetry, that's what I wanted to do. But anyhow, I couldn't do literature and physics, because that's what I wanted to do, but I settled for philosophy. But that turned out to be a good thing. So there you are. Okay, I need to move faster. So then I started physics and philosophy at the Edgar University. Later on defected to England, and then did physics and history and philosophy of science in Leeds. That was just fantastic. And I spent a year after graduation searching for something worthwhile to do, which is quite the opposite. I really think that I'm coming from AS and Lisp, and I think that's just as good a preparation than not doing that. So okay, so it means that's the reference. But and basically that I only go down this up to this point. There's a lot more, but I have to skip it. Walt Cunningham, the inventor of Wiki, said in an interview that Lisp is not a programming language, it's a building material which you can use to invent your own paradigm. And the trouble with Lisp is that it doesn't give you any guidance how to use it, and it is capable of delivering any paradigm. So before you write your program, you invent a new programming paradigm. That's exactly what I did. Thankfully, Leeds, I actually got a PhD out of it. And of course, I don't know, I must have had the title, Language-Oriented Programming in Metalism. If you ever heard of domain-specific languages, which is quite popular today, that's exactly what I did 22 years ago. And okay, so move on, but it's all comes together. And then my wife, we already had 2 kids, wanted to move back to Hungary. So before I worked in industry from then on. Very good, I don't have time for that. But I did a Smart Award for Innovation in 2003, personalized mobile computing. So knew that in 2003 it's going to be all personalized and mobile computing. So that's with Christopher Goodman, I must mention him, because he was helping me right from that start up to today. So I couldn't have done it without him, because you can't do these kind of things on your own. Okay, so move on. So yeah, our tools are broken. Yeah, they're not we've done the poll. So basically, just very briefly, thoughts are really first-class objects. Like the brain, it is. There is the thing you manipulate are thoughts. The smallest units of what you ever do is thoughts, which is really cool, but there aren't many of these. But even once you've done that, and to go back to Lakatos, it's really good for the context of discovery, managing that. But then you have to manually transpose it into create the concept of justification, i.e. publishing in a reputable form, and the whole thing is broken. Because once you did put it into Word, export it to Word, there's no way back, and you can't do the eval apply of going from one to the other. So it's just broken. I'm not telling anymore. And of course that reusable is missing, repurposability missing, so it's just really broken. When you do a slide, you may have written lots of papers, and then you do a slide, unless if you are using hyperpost or something like that. You have written your papers, and then you go and retype it in whatever you do. And if you change your mind, that's it, you're screwed. So this is utterly broken. Anyhow, build a system that frees me from that brokerage. Okay, let's move on, because when Ted Nelson's best line is, the problem is not with me, it's with paper. And I couldn't agree more. I'm not the only one with a sort of intertwingular mind. I think everybody does. But really, you can't do that. So that's really the specific problems. So, yes, okay, 1 minute, okay. So we really got information about digital amnesia and the Google effect. So that's really bad. Okay, and instead of searching, we do research all the time. So, and just really, this is what happens, that it really creates the context. Sorry, I missed all that, but that long line of a mark does it. So basically, you just write down a sentence in which you refer to entities in the world, which you can search or create yourself. And that's actually the sentence you've written down, or that your thought is in context by definition. And that's how you build. Anyhow, yes, sorry. This is not it all up, yeah.
Before we do questions, because I also noticed with you, David, that even though it is a kind of an academic conference, I have asked you to sell. So anybody who has something that they want promoted, of whatever idea of software, whatever, send it to me. I will put it on the site. So once it's on the site, because I'm sure you left out a lot, because you have so many ideas.
Yes. Sorry, yes.
We need hard.
Yes, I'm hoping to do that. Yes.
Questions? All the way back here, Carla.
Hi. I just picking up what noticed that you mentioned cosmology for computing.
What?
Do you say cosmology?
Oh yes, that's that Nazon. It is really, of course, there is a brand new cosmology underneath. It's basically graph, too long, but basically the only new thing is, and about it, that was all about structure and collaboration. And I just add interpretation to it. So along the structural links or the links between the intertwined graph bits, you can say what they are, you can say about the nodes what they are, and because you at the meta level you can give possibly multiple labels between the connection, and at the meta level you can assign arbitrary interpretations to those links, so produce anything you want. So really, I'll list it all out, but you end up with a universal hypermedia. So if you put things into this system, you can generate anything you want. You're not tied to, oh, I have to do a slide, so I'm using this program. No. And in the end, it really should be methods are user extensible. At the moment, I'm doing it, yes. And we can sort of, in an open source community, hopefully build all kinds of things like generating slides or anything else. But in the end, once we really bootstrap into meta level, we can actually make it fully tinkerable. So we really get back to where we were with Hypercar. Except that it's going to be on the web. Thank you for the question.
No, there'll be more questions.
No, I mean, that was a very good question. That's what I meant.
Henry.
Yes. Yes, please.
How does that relate to semantic web?
Well, that's exactly as Mark already answered. It creates a semantic web, semantics like semantic web. And well, it's much better. First of all, it's fully free of XML, which is an abomination. So it's disastrous because I wasted in the smart world. I wasted half a year. I went, I've done my own meta language, but I don't need my own meta language. It's XML. It's got a meta circular definition of itself, just like my meta list. That's fine, and it's already running anyway. So let's use it. And then I started using it. But it's hierarchical. It just doesn't. It just my little embedded graph database was more powerful and more useful than what it actually used to model, i.e. XML. So I just ditched it. You can't. I mean, you can. Of course, you can do anything with anything, but it's just hopeless. On the other hand, link data is and open link data. It's great. Pity that and it doesn't really matter at the end. Where, if you got triplets, which is what you have, or quadruplets, whatever, it doesn't matter whether you waste your CPU on parsing XML and all that. So basically, the idea of the semantic web is very valuable, and that's just an implementation defect, if you like, that is XML.
Time for one more question.
Quick question. I'd like to say thank you very much. Thank you very much. Next, me. So I'm personally very interested in using text while thinking, not just recording, particularly when authoring academic documents, which is part of the work that I'm doing here. It's been a bit of a back and forth, especially with Mark this morning, about interaction and so on. The name of my software, everything, the name of my company, the name of my philosophy is Liquid. But we have to look at how liquid and linearity works together. And I would like to credit Doug with all his love and thoughts. Since the last Future of Text, we now have a son, Edgar. Some of you have seen him here in the back. He's trying to sleep. He turned 4 months on Friday. And Edgar represents to me the future of text in the most visceral way, and I have dreams for him. I would like to read a brief extract from a poem that I wrote about him coming into the world. Imagine nothing, imagine black. Imagine something undefined coming together, your very perception building in fits and starts. Imagine glimpses of light, and then later glimpses of recognition. Imagine a vague notion of motion, but no way to move. Imagine expending great deals of energy to lift your head, then rest. Imagine the slow realization of your arms and your legs and your body and yourself. Imagine the slow dawn of awareness coming in shocks and taking you away from a warm, cozy peace. This is the long hello, as what you are develops into your and our consciousness and imagination.
So what I'm meaning to highlight is that being born is a process. It's not in our DNA how long our arms are, because they will change over time, right? And I think it's quite obvious that how we stretch into cyberspace with our tools or drive our car, that it's really a part of us. This is something that comes up in academia every couple of decades as being kind of a revelation. But when you see your child looking at you and in one moment there's somebody there, another time he's kind of a zombie, it makes it very visceral and real. So what our brains can think with is what our brains can interact with, something we've heard mirrored a lot this morning. But it's so important because the interactions of our media affords and constrains, defines what we can do and therefore who we are. Now, this is Edgar learning about himself and the world in a rich sea of interactions. Look at the color, look at the dimensions, look at his life. It's all, last week he figured out he has toes. But this is what I fear, I really worry about. I don't want his intellectual life to be stifled by haunting of dead trees on linear little boxes. What I wish for him is to have full and rich, what I call liquid interactions, even with his documents when he grows up. And as we talked about this morning, it's not just going to be with AR, VR and that stuff. But here's the thing that I'm learning more and more as a PhD student here. Rich liquid information interactions is a great goal. However, an academic document is linear. To a certain extent, it has to be linear because it makes an argument based on things which is thought about in this way, which then presents a conclusion. A document is a human perspective at a point in time. Though, of course, the world of information is not linear, as we have seen and heard and we all know about. It is all intertwingled, as Ted put it in 1974. So, what currently primarily happens during the document creation process is that a literature review, or Wendy's back, okay. If Wendy wasn't here, I'd call it gossip, is performed to inform new research and new thinking, resulting in a new document, which is all well and good, except when this new document is formed, only the loosest connection with the rest of the world remains through mentions in a reference section at the back of the book. Just the fact that it's in the back is crazy. And of course, when you have that printed out to PDF or paper, it's still kind of interactive. And I think it was David who talked about the codex earlier. The index on the back of the book is hypertext too. You can always go to the back of the book, find the page numbers and jump around. Not good enough. But of course, it's not just the citations which are severed. It's also the author's notes, research, and other perspectives. Did you know that the word node actually means not? So it means you can't, oh, don't show me that. So it means you cannot have a node without a connection to something. It's part of a network intrinsically. So my work is all about trying to take linear plus liquid, which is my term for rich interactions, together and make something powerful out of that. How cool, huh? Keynote. So cool. So the linear document wasn't written in that way. The table of contents was not always clear and linear. Research and thoughts keep the document in flux until it's done, obviously. Otherwise, it's not a research document. Otherwise, it's just someone writing something out. The author really should have the opportunity to work with information as flexibly as possible. As Mark Anderson said to me once, it's like a puzzle. You don't know where things fit. You just put the blue bits over there and the green ones over here, and you see what pattern emerges. Thank you for that, Mark. It should be possible to move things around, to see connections, add connections, including external connections. And you should be able to indicate what things might be missing when you see the pattern emerge. Central theme of my work. The last 4 minutes, talk about my specific projects. I have 2 pieces of software and 1 proposal for a format. The 2 pieces of software, Liquid Flow, is a tool that's available on the Mac store. It's been out for a while. It allows you to interact with any tool, any Mac OS. Select text, keyboard shortcut, boom, there you are. I'll give you a 15-second demo. Liquid Author is my word processor that after 3 years of on and off is finally out this week. So I really want you to try it. If you're Mac people running Sierra, you can download it. I made it free this week so everybody can try it and give feedback. Liquid View that I'll be talking about is a component of Author, thank you, which will be built inside Author, and that's an important aspect. And finally, I want to mention the notion of a deep PDF, which is a PDF document where the original document, whatever it might be, Word, Author, whatever, is embedded, plus an XML, kind of a neutral format. Reason for that is anybody with a PDF reader can open it. But if you have the original document, you have the original interactions, all the metadata, all of that stuff is there. So you no longer have to say, can you send me the this or the that or whatever. PDF, which I used to hate, David, you were one of the people to discuss that point with me, has the linearity, it has the frozenness, which is crucial for record, that it can be co-opted. 15-second demo of Liquid Flow. Select text, keyboard shortcut, the Liquid Flow menu. You have shortcuts, so you see references with R, etymology with E. So you get any internet accessible search. Let's do the same thing now, system. But now I did it with just keyboard shortcuts all the way through, and how I did it, search for an image. It is very easy because you saw the keyboard shortcuts listed on the right. Thank you for nodding, Bengt. It is easy. Please try it. It's extremely possible to persuade people to try it without showing, and I don't have time for a bigger demo. So before I show you a little bit of Author, which I decided to do a short while after Doug passed away, the name Author has the same root as Augment, which was the name of his system after it was called NLS. And there's no way I can finish this. It's a word processor. It's a big project. But I have to start, and I own this. That means that we as a community can change it. I aim to augment authoring clearly and credibly. Credibly, by that I mean providing quick to add citations. To augment reading, to understand the text, which is partly by using Liquid Flow. To augment reading, to question the text, which is also checking the citations, including video. Oh, goodness. Providing different ways to view the text, different things. Design principles, information within eyes reach, it's a minimalist design. Tools within hands reach, and the text should feel tangible. Let me show you what I mean by that. So you can select any text in Author. Do I have to click for this? Yeah. And you can do a keyboard shortcut, or you can control click to assign as a heading, let's say heading level 1. Once you have done that, you can pinch on your trackpad and you collapse the document into an outline. So it should feel like it's tangible. You can click anywhere else to go anywhere else. And you can also, if you're in edit mode, click in the margin to redo your document. Similarly, you can select any word, do Command F, and it'll show you only the occurrences of that text in the document. You can click to jump to that, or click in the margin, or escape to go back. Just really briefly, I'm so sorry, I apologize. I'll buy you all lunch. I already did. To do citation, you can use manual Mendeley and Amazon. So we're going to do Hamlet, search Amazon, find it, click on it. It's copied all the things across. So when you click save, you go then into read mode. You can click and you can see everything. I expected to have a little more time when I recorded this demo. You can also control click on a YouTube video to copy that particular time. So when you now go back to Author, Author knows you have a YouTube URL in memory. So when you do Command T for citation, you can just click on that, and it will have all the metadata from that copied across, except for the author, because it doesn't know who's actually speaking. Click save, go into read mode, read mode. And it'll then play. The program that I'm going to describe to you is quickly. So it plays from exactly that moment. I'm over time, which, Vint, has it ever happened before? Don't answer honestly. So I'm going to show you this really, really briefly. This is what I plan to do next, right? So you understand the notion of collapsing a document into outline, obviously. So here, imagine you do that, but it's a non-linear outline. So now I can, at least it's quicker, this one. You can move things anywhere on your screen. So you are playing with your thoughts off your document. You can add new sections and make them bigger and higher level and all of that stuff. Now, please note that they are actually still in columns, logically. So you can snap in and out of columns because otherwise it gets way too messy when you have enough stuff. So a key thing is, as you saw earlier in the abstracted version, you can do connections any way you want. This is going to be a huge part of the research because these are just manual. But what about the ones going to external stuff? What about the ones doing keywords and such? No idea. Look forward to talking to you guys about it. In the key, you switch from a word processing document into Liquid View and back. They're not two separate applications, it's just a view. So finally then, please get my software. This is my sales pitch. I have never done this before, but finally Author is here, so I have to. It's free, but I would like your time. It's free till Friday, and you find it just by searching for Liquid in the App Store. And questions? And yes, in terms of lifespan of documents, how about a human lifespan? This is my son's name tattooed on my arm. Thank you very much. We only have 3 minutes left for questions now. Please, questions. Yes?
Hi, Frode. So looking at your tools and your idea and your sort of philosophy towards this, I can see a number of sort of interface style innovations here that you're experimenting with. But from the concept of how this stuff is interconnected, what is genuinely sort of new here? What is something that you think is a different way of thinking about these things compared to, say, existing spatial hypertext systems or existing sort of
That's a great question. Almost nothing here is new, right? What I'm trying to do is just that interface layer and by putting things together, right? I mean, Mark will probably be talking about spatial hypertexts as well in his talk. I haven't invented hardly any of that, right? I mean, I did things in the 90s just mocking out, moving, things about. That's not the point of my work. The point of my work is we have these super powerful computers, we have APIs, we have the internet, we have HTML, we have all these things. How can we use these infrastructures to make them actually usable? Right? Because one thing that Doug and I disagreed on a bit, he was all about power before ease of use. He hated ease of use, right? But then the notion of every time you do something in your mind, you burn sugar. I don't want you to burn sugar, right? The reason I made Liquid Flow is that you can search any database for any information in half a second, right? Once you've gotten into the habit of that, it is the same as stepping forward. You don't make a decision, right? So that's why I'm so happy Mark is here and other people. When it comes to the underlying stuff, nothing new, just that. One more question, I think. Yes?
Do I understand that it's just on the Mac? So if I don't have a Mac and I don't even want to have one, I can't. That's
I've spent my money on this and that of supporters. Thank you, Ben. And thank you, Edgar and Emily, because it's your money too. It's like a sculpture to me. So I'm building. I'm answering your question a little defensively because I can't. I've tried before to release software on Windows. But for me, it's like wearing a bikini. I just can't live in it, so I can't develop for it. Okay, thank you very much. We now have a 1 hour lunch.